The colony on Arelon 4 was not a place of dreams. It was a harsh mining world, carved into rocky cliffs and endless tunnels, where humans lived under the rule of the Zerath, an alien species that believed strength came only from domination. Humans were not slaves here, but they were not free either. Every person was assigned tasks, every life was monitored, and even private matters were often decided by the Zerath Council. Daniel Hayes, a young engineer from Earth, had spent 3 years on Arelon 4. He was skilled with machines, quick with his hands, and clever with ideas that saved time and labor. But in this place, being clever was dangerous. The Zerath preferred obedience, not innovation. Still, Daniel kept working, fixing broken engines and making sure the colony's power generators did not fail. One morning, as the artificial sun lamps glowed across the colony square, Daniel was summoned. The metallic voice of a Zerath guard called his name, ordering him to appear before the council chamber. Daniel obeyed, though unease settled deep in his chest. No human wanted attention from the Zerath. Attention meant trouble. Inside the chamber, towering Zerath leaders sat on raised platforms. Their dark-scaled skin glistened under the cold lights, and their four-fingered hands rested on control panels. Their leader, Lord Vare, stared down at Daniel with yellow, unblinking eyes. "Human Daniel Hayes," Vare said. His voice echoed deep and sharp. "You have been chosen for a union. This is not a request. It is a command." Daniel's heart thumped. "Union? With whom?" he asked carefully, knowing every word could be judged as disrespect. The doors at the side of the chamber opened. A figure stepped forward, an alien woman, slender and tall, her skin faintly silver in the light. Her dark hair, braided simply, hung to her shoulders. Her eyes, bright violet, lowered to the floor as if she dared not look at anyone. She wore a plain tunic, the mark of a slave. "This," Lord Vare declared, "is Lyra of the Thalran. She is property of the Council, but she will serve you as wife. The Council believes such unions will create order between species. You will accept." Daniel's mouth went dry. Marriage to someone he had never met? And not just anyone. A slave of the Thalran, a species he knew little about except for rumors of betrayal and defeat in war. His first instinct was to protest, to shout that this was not right. But one look at the guards, their weapons ready, silenced him. "I understand," Daniel said finally, forcing the words out. His fists clenched at his sides. Lyra did not speak. She stood silently, head bowed, her hands folded before her. To the Council, she was less than a person, just a possession to be traded. Daniel felt a pang of anger, not at her, but at the system that treated lives this way. The ceremony was swift. There were no vows, no celebration, only a declaration from the Council that Daniel and Lyra were now joined. Then they were dismissed. Their assigned quarters were small, a single room with metal walls, one bed, and a small workstation. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed while Lyra stood near the door, silent as if waiting for instructions. "You don't have to just stand there," Daniel said, trying to sound calm. "Sit, rest. I won't treat you like they do." Lyra glanced at him, her violet eyes wary, then slowly sat in the chair by the workstation. Still, she did not speak. Daniel rubbed his forehead. He had not asked for this. He had not asked for her. And yet, looking at her, he could see exhaustion in her face, the weariness of someone who had endured too much. He remembered how the Zerath announced her as property, not as a person. That thought unsettled him more than the forced marriage itself. "I don't know what they expect from us," he admitted quietly. "But I won't hurt you, that's all I can promise right now." For the first time, Lyra lifted her head. Her lips moved slightly as if she wanted to say something, but no words came. Instead, she only nodded, a small, quick gesture. Days passed. Daniel returned to his work in the mines and repair stations, while Lyra remained mostly in their quarters. The Zerath gave her no tasks except to remain with him, as though simply existing beside a human fulfilled their strange sense of order. Yet Daniel began to notice small things. When he came home late one evening, he found the old heating unit in the room running smoothly, though it had been broken for weeks. Lyra sat nearby, hands folded in her lap, pretending she had done nothing. "You fixed that?" Daniel asked. She looked away, but her silence was answer enough. The next night he returned to find his scattered tools neatly organized, each arranged by size and function. Again, Lyra gave no explanation. Daniel began to see a different side of her. She was not only quiet, she was observant, intelligent, and capable. but for some reason she hid it. One evening, Daniel decided to test a thought. He deliberately left a broken power cell on the desk, wires sparking faintly. He said nothing and went to sleep. When he woke the next morning, the power cell was repaired, perfectly sealed, humming softly with energy. Daniel smiled despite himself. "You're not just clever," he murmured, watching Lyra as she carefully folded her blanket. "You're hiding it." "Why?" Lyra froze. For a long moment she said nothing. Then in a voice so soft Daniel almost didn't hear it, she whispered, "Because they watch." Daniel stared. It was the first time she had spoken to him. Her voice was gentle but steady. He wanted to ask more, but she shook her head, eyes darting to the walls. "They watch," she repeated, almost like a warning. Daniel understood. The Zereth wanted slaves to appear weak. If they saw her strength, they would punish her, or worse. That night, as he lay awake in the dim light, Daniel felt a shift inside him. He had entered this union unwillingly, angry at being forced. But now he saw Lyra not as a burden, but as someone carrying a secret weight heavier than his own. She was more than she appeared, and he realized something else. If the Zerath feared cleverness, then Lyra's silence might not only be survival, it might be rebellion. The days that followed grew heavier with tension. Daniel noticed the way Zerath guards lingered near him more often, their eyes watching not him but Lyra. She, in turn, became even quieter, her gaze often on the floor. But when they were alone, when the metal walls hummed and no footsteps echoed outside, she sometimes let a single word slip or gave Daniel a fleeting glance that held more meaning than silence ever could. The forced union was supposed to chain them together. Yet Daniel felt the first threads of something else forming, something fragile, unspoken, but alive. In a world of steel and control, perhaps even the smallest bond could grow into something powerful. And Daniel began to wonder, had the Council, in their arrogance, made a mistake by forcing them together? The days on Arelon 4 blurred together in a rhythm of labor and silence. The colony lived by the schedules of the Zerath. Work hours, rest hours, curfews. Humans obeyed because disobedience brought punishment. Yet, in Daniel's small room, something different was beginning. Lyra, once a shadow in his life, had revealed a single word: watch. It was the first crack in her silence. Daniel could not forget it. It echoed in his mind every time he saw her cautious movements, every time he noticed her quick hands fixing something without admitting it. He wanted to know more. One evening, after a long day repairing mining drills, Daniel sat at the workstation while Lyra folded their blankets. He placed a small broken device on the table, a communicator, its circuits burnt out. He did not say anything, only leaned back in his chair. Lyra's eyes flicked toward it, then to him. For a long time she stayed still, her expression unreadable. Finally, when she thought he wasn't looking, she reached for the device. Her fingers moved with surprising skill, pulling open panels, rerouting wires. Within minutes, the communicator flickered with life. Daniel smiled. "You're better than most engineers I've worked with." Lyra froze. Slowly, she put the communicator down. Her violet eyes met his for a brief moment before turning away. "You don't have to hide with me," Daniel said quietly. She shook her head. Then, to his surprise, she whispered, "If they see, they take." Daniel frowned. "Take what?" Lyra's voice trembled, but she forced the words out. "They took my people. My home. They take everything." Her words hung in the air like heavy chains. For the next few days, Daniel did not push her. But small changes began to happen. When they were alone, Lyra spoke in short sentences. Sometimes just a word, sometimes two. She told him about the Thalren, her people who once thrived on green worlds with oceans of crystal blue water. They had knowledge of energy, of machines that healed instead of destroyed. "Why did the Zerath conquer you?" Daniel asked one night. Lyra hesitated, then said, "They did not win. We were betrayed. Our allies opened the gates and the Zerath walked inside. My people fought, but we could not fight both. Many were taken. The rest, gone." Her voice cracked at the last word, but she did not cry. Her strength was in her silence, Daniel realized. She carried pain like a stone hidden deep inside, unseen but unbroken. One evening, Daniel returned from work to find Lyra bent over the heating unit again. But this time, she wasn't repairing it. She was building something new. Tiny coils and wires lay spread across the floor. "What are you doing?" Daniel asked, careful not to sound accusing. Lyra looked up, startled. Then, after a pause, she whispered, "A shield." Daniel blinked. "A shield?" She nodded. "To hide sound. Small, but enough. They cannot hear us." Daniel's eyes widened. If she could create something to block the Zerath's constant listening, it meant they could finally speak freely. When she finished, she placed the small device on the table. A faint hum filled the air. "Now," Lyra said softly, "we can talk." It was the first time she had spoken a full sentence to him. In the safety of that shield, words poured out slowly, like water breaking through stone. Lyra told Daniel about her people's inventions, their dreams of peace, and how the Zerath twisted everything into tools of war. She told him about the camps where the Thalren were kept, how many pretended to be weak so the overseers would ignore them. Daniel, in return, told her about Earth. He spoke of blue skies, wide rivers, cities full of light. He told her about music, laughter, and the strange human habit of hoping even when everything seemed lost. Lyra listened, eyes wide. "Hope?" she repeated quietly. "We had that once." "You still do," Daniel said firmly. "As long as you're alive, it's there." Their bond grew. Every night when the shield hummed to life, their voices filled the small room. Lyra's words became stronger, her eyes less afraid. Daniel began to see not just a survivor, but a leader hidden beneath years of silence. One night, Lyra confessed something that made Daniel sit up straight. "The Zerath fear humans," she said. Daniel blinked. "Fear us? Why?" "Because you are stubborn," she explained. "You do not bow as easily as others. They think, maybe you are dangerous. That is why they watch." Daniel felt a chill. He had always thought the Zerath saw humans as tools, nothing more. But fear? That changed everything. The next day at the mines, Daniel could not stop thinking about it. He noticed how Zerath guards always stood close when humans worked in groups, how they interrupted conversations, how they punished even small mistakes. Maybe Lyra was right. Maybe the Zerath saw something in humanity they wanted to control before it grew too strong. That evening, when he returned home, he found Lyra waiting by the shield device. Her expression was tense. "They are suspicious," she whispered. "We must be careful." Daniel nodded. "I know, but hiding forever won't work either." Lyra looked at him, her violet eyes sharp. "Then what will you do?" Daniel hesitated. He had no plan, no answer. Yet he knew one thing. He could not let Lyra remain a slave, not when he had seen her strength, her mind, her heart. The days ahead became more dangerous. Zerath guards visited their quarters twice, pretending to inspect equipment but clearly searching for something more. Lyra always hid the shield device before they entered. Daniel kept his expression blank, pretending ignorance. One night after the guards left, Daniel turned to Lyra. "They'll find it eventually." Lyra's hands tightened around the small device. "Then we must be ready." Daniel stared at her. "Ready for what?" Her voice was calm, steady. "For the moment when hiding is no longer enough." That night, sleep did not come easily. Daniel lay awake, listening to the faint hum of the shield, thinking about her words. He remembered how the Zerath forced him into this union, believing they were controlling him. But what if the union was the very thing that would undo their control? Lyra was no longer just a silent companion. She was a partner, someone who carried secrets of her people, someone who dared to resist even in silence. Together, they had built something small but powerful. Trust. And Daniel knew that trust could grow into something far greater. The next morning, As the colony square filled with workers, Daniel walked beside Lyra. Guards watched them closely, their eyes suspicious. But Daniel noticed something new. When Lyra lifted her head and glanced around, a few other alien slaves met her eyes, briefly, quietly, almost like they recognized her. It was a tiny moment, gone in an instant, but Daniel caught it, and he realized that Lyra's secret was not just her intelligence, it was her influence. Even broken and enslaved, she was a spark, waiting to ignite. The Zereth had forced Daniel and Lyra together to maintain control. But what if instead they had just planted the seed of something they could not stop? That night, within the safety of the shield, Daniel leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "Lyra," he said, "if the day comes when hiding isn't enough, I'll stand with you." Her violet eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she gave a single nod. And in that silent agreement, a shared secret became something more. A promise. The mines of Arelon 4 were dangerous even on calm days. Tunnels stretched for miles carved into unstable rock, and machines groaned as they dug deep into the planet's crust. Humans worked side by side with other enslaved species, while the Zerath guards stood watch, their glowing staffs ready to strike at the smallest mistake. Daniel had grown used to the danger, but that morning felt different. The tunnel seemed to tremble more than usual, as if the planet itself was restless. He checked the readings on his scanner and frowned. "Too much pressure," he muttered. "If they keep drilling at this rate, the tunnels will collapse." The Zerath overseer nearby barked at him. "Work, human. Do not speak unless ordered." Daniel bit back his words. Speaking the truth was useless here. The Zerath never listened. Hours passed. The rumbling grew louder. Dust fell from the ceiling, sprinkling the workers like ash. Daniel exchanged worried glances with the other humans, but no one dared stop. The Zerath shouted for faster work, blind to the danger. Suddenly, a deep crack thundered through the tunnel. The ground shook violently. A section of ceiling crashed down, sending rocks and dust everywhere. Screams echoed as workers scrambled to escape. "Collapse!" someone shouted. Panic spread. Daniel rushed to help a man pinned under debris, pulling him free just as another wall split apart. He knew the tunnels would not hold for long. If they did not act quickly, hundreds could be buried alive. In the chaos, Daniel caught sight of Lyra. She had been assigned to carry supplies that day, but instead of fleeing, she stood still, her sharp violet eyes scanning the tunnel walls. "Lyra, this way," Daniel called, waving to her, but she shook her head. "No, listen." Her voice was firm, louder than he had ever heard it before. For a moment, even the panicked workers around her paused. Lyra pointed to the side passage. "That tunnel is safe. The others will fall." Daniel stared. How could she know? But there was no time to doubt. He trusted her instinct. "Everyone," he shouted. "This way. Follow her." A group of workers hesitated, then followed Lyra. Daniel stayed at her side, helping people move quickly. They rushed into the passage just as the main tunnel collapsed behind them with a roar like thunder. Dust and darkness swallowed everything. When the shaking stopped, silence filled the air. The survivors coughed, their faces pale with fear and dust. Dozens had escaped because they had followed Lyra. She had saved them, but their relief was short-lived. The Zerath overseers forced their way through the rubble, their glowing staffs crackling with energy. Their leader's eyes burned with fury. "You disobeyed orders," he shouted. "You led workers away from their stations." Daniel stepped forward. "She saved lives. If we had stayed, we'd all be dead." The Zerath sneered. "Silence, human. Slaves do not command. This is rebellion." He raised his staff toward Lyra. Sparks danced at its tip. Without thinking, Daniel moved between them. "No," he shouted. The overseer's eyes narrowed. "You would defend her?" "Yes," Daniel said firmly. His heart pounded, but his voice did not shake. "She's the reason any of us are alive right now." The overseer's gaze flicked to Lyra, who stood tall, no longer bowing her head. Her violet eyes met his without fear. For the first time, Daniel saw her as more than a survivor. She was defiant, unbroken. The Zerath lowered his staff, but his voice was cold. "This will be reported to the council. Both of you will face judgment." He ordered guards to surround them. The workers, still trembling from the collapse, exchanged glances. Some looked at Lyra with awe, others with fear. They had seen what she had done. They had seen her courage. That night, Daniel and Lyra were confined to their quarters. Guards stood outside the door, making escape impossible. Inside, the air was heavy with silence. "You shouldn't have spoken," Lyra said softly. Daniel shook his head. "And what? Let them punish you for saving lives?" "I couldn't." Her eyes softened, and for a moment the weight of the day lifted. But then she lowered her gaze. "You don't understand. Now they will watch us even more. They will see me." Daniel leaned closer. "Then let them see. You're not just a slave, Lyra. Today proved that." She was quiet for a long time. Finally she whispered, "My people, we were leaders once. Builders. Thinkers. The Zirath fear that strength. That is why they keep us silent." Daniel nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time to stop being silent." The next morning the council summoned them. The great chamber loomed with cold light as Zirath leaders glared from their high seats. Lord Vare's voice thundered across the room. "Human Daniel Hayes, alien slave Lyra of the Thalrin, you acted without command. You endangered order. What do you say in your defense?" Daniel opened his mouth, but Lyra stepped forward first. "I saved lives," she said clearly. Her voice carried through the chamber, strong and calm. "The tunnels were unstable. If I had stayed silent, many would have died. That is truth." The council shifted uncomfortably. Her boldness was unexpected. Slaves were not supposed to speak this way. Lord Vare's eyes narrowed. "Truth is decided by power, and power belongs to us. You will remember your place." But Daniel noticed something. Some of the younger Zirath whispered among themselves. Doubt flickered in their eyes. Even they could not deny the collapse had been real. The council declared punishment. Lyra would be separated from Daniel, returned to the slave camps. Daniel would be watched more closely. As guards pulled Lyra away, she looked back at Daniel. For the first time, she did not appear afraid. Her eyes burned with determination, as if to say, "This is not the end." That night, Daniel sat alone in his quarters. The silence was unbearable. He thought about the look in Lyra's eyes, the way she had stood tall before the council. She was not only surviving anymore, she was resisting. And Daniel realized something. The Zirath had made a mistake. By forcing them together, by trying to control them, they had created a bond they could not break. Lyra was no longer just his forced companion. She was the spark of something greater, and Daniel knew he could not let that spark be extinguished. He whispered to himself, "I'll find you. I'll stand with you. Whatever it takes." Outside, the cold lights of Arelon 4 flickered over the colony, but deep inside, Daniel felt a fire growing stronger than fear. A fire that had begun the moment Lyra chose to speak. And he knew the breaking point had come, not just for them, but for everyone living under Zirath rule. The separation came swiftly. One morning, guards stormed into Daniel's quarters without warning. Their heavy boots echoed on the metal floor as they pulled Lyra away. Daniel tried to stop them, but a strike from a staff sent him crashing to the ground. By the time he staggered back to his feet, she was gone. The silence left behind was worse than any wound. The room felt empty, stripped of its warmth. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall where Lyra used to sit, her violet eyes sharp and thoughtful. Now she was back in the slave camps, surrounded by fences and guards. Daniel clenched his fists. The Zirath thought they could break bonds by chains, but they were wrong. The days dragged on. Daniel returned to the mines, working under strict supervision. Guards followed his every step, making sure he spoke to no one. Yet despite the pressure, Daniel noticed something new among the workers. When he passed humans or other alien slaves, their eyes lingered on him longer than before. Some nodded slightly, others whispered when the guards were not near. They had seen what Lyra did during the collapse. They had seen Daniel defend her before the council. A quiet current of hope spread through the workers. Daniel could feel it, though no one dared speak openly. One night after finishing his shift, Daniel slipped into the storage tunnels where fewer guards roamed. There, in the shadows, 2 human miners approached him. "You spoke for her," one whispered. "You stood against them." Daniel glanced around nervously. "Keep your voices down. The walls have ears." The miner nodded. "Still, we wanted you to know we're with you. Whatever comes, we won't stay silent anymore." Daniel's chest tightened. The spark Lyra had lit was spreading. Meanwhile, in the slave camps, Lyra endured harsh treatment. The Zirath wanted to remind her of her place. She was given heavy labor and little rest. Yet even there she was not broken. At night, when guards grew tired, she whispered to other Thalren and to alien slaves of different species. Her words were quiet but powerful. "They fear us because we remember who we are," she told them. "They fear humans because they do not bow. Together we are not weak. Together we can be more." The slaves listened. Some shook their heads, too afraid. But others leaned closer, hungry for her words. The seed of rebellion was growing in more than one place now. One evening, Daniel returned to his quarters to find a folded scrap of paper hidden under his tools. It was unusual. Writing was forbidden for slaves, but this was clearly written by hand. It read, "She is alive. She speaks. She is not forgotten." Daniel's heart pounded as he read the words again and again. Lyra was alive. She was resisting even in the camps. He knew then what he had to do. The plan was dangerous. Escape from the camps was nearly impossible. Guards patrolled day and night, and anyone caught outside their assigned area was punished. But Daniel was an engineer, and engineers saw paths where others saw walls. He studied the supply routes, the tunnels, and the schedules of the guards. Slowly, a picture formed in his mind. If he could reach the eastern gates at the right hour, if he could disable the power to the security field, he could slip inside, but he would not be able to do it alone. That night, Daniel met secretly with the two miners again. He explained the plan in hushed tones. "You're mad," one whispered. "If they catch you, you're finished." Daniel looked him straight in the eye. "If we do nothing, we're finished anyway. They'll keep us in chains forever. But if we free her, if she leads, everything can change." The miners exchanged a long look. Finally, they nodded. "Then we're with you." The night of the escape came. The moons of Arelon IV cast pale light over the colony as Daniel and his two allies crept through the shadows. They carried stolen tools instead of weapons, their steps silent on the dusty ground. Daniel reached the power junction near the eastern gate. His hands worked quickly, rewiring circuits and bypassing locks. Sweat dripped down his face, but his fingers were steady. Within minutes, the glowing fence around the camp flickered and dimmed. "Now," Daniel whispered. They slipped inside. The camp was quiet, most slaves asleep, guards pacing lazily. Daniel moved through the rows of shelters, searching desperately. Then he saw her. Lyra sat by a dim fire with a group of slaves, her face tired but her eyes alert. When she saw Daniel, her breath caught. "Daniel," she whispered. He rushed forward, pulling her up. "We don't have much time. Come with me." But Lyra shook her head. "Not just me." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" Lyra looked around at the others. "They are ready. If I leave alone, hope dies. If we leave together, hope spreads." Daniel's stomach knotted. Helping her escape was risky enough. Freeing dozens was almost impossible, but when he saw the determination in her eyes, he understood. This was bigger than them now. Alarms suddenly blared across the camp. The guards had noticed the failing fence. Shouts rang out, boots thundered. "Go!" Daniel urged. Lyra raised her voice, strong and clear. "Everyone now, run!" Slaves surged from their shelters, following her like water bursting through a dam. Daniel and the miners guided them toward the weak point in the fence. Chaos erupted as guards rushed in, swinging staffs and shouting orders. Daniel fought not with weapons but with cleverness. He triggered machinery to spark, creating smoke and confusion. He sealed gates behind them, slowing the guards' chase. Through it all, Lyra led the people forward, her voice cutting through fear. "Do not stop. Freedom waits beyond." By the time they reached the edge of the colony, dozens had escaped. Some were injured, some terrified, but they were free of the fences. For the first time, they tasted air without chains, but freedom came at a cost. Behind them, Zerath guards regrouped, their forces gathering. The council would not forgive this. As they hid in the rocky cliffs outside the colony, Daniel turned to Lyra. His chest heaved with exhaustion, but his eyes burned with resolve. "We can't go back now," he said. "They'll hunt us." Lyra nodded. "Yes, but look at them." She gestured to the group of freed slaves. Despite their fear, their eyes shone with hope. For the first time in years, they believed in something beyond survival. "This is not the end," Lyra said softly. "This is the beginning." Daniel looked at her, remembering the day they were forced together, the silence that once filled their room. Now she stood tall, her voice strong, her people gathering around her. and he realized that the choice had been made. The chains were broken, there was no turning back. The cliffs outside the colony became their refuge. Cold winds swept across the rocks, carrying the scent of iron and dust. The freed slaves huddled together in makeshift shelters, their faces lined with fear and hope. For many, this was the first night outside fences in years. Daniel sat near a small fire, his eyes scanning the group. He saw humans, Thalrin, and other species, their bodies weary but their spirits awake. Each of them looked to Lyra. She had become more than just one of them. She was their voice, their guide, their symbol of something greater. Lyra stood at the edge of the cliff, her violet eyes reflecting the distant glow of the colony. She could still see the shining towers where the Zareth Council ruled, a place of order built on the suffering of many. She whispered to herself, "They think chains are stronger than hearts." "They are wrong." Daniel walked to her side. "They'll come after us." "We both know that," Lyra nodded. "Yes, but they don't understand. They think fear will bring us back." "It won't." He looked at her, at the way the firelight touched her sharp features, and realized something. The Zerath had forced them together in cruelty, but through pain, something stronger had formed. Not just survival, not just alliance, something human, something universal. The next morning, Daniel gathered the group. "We can't stay here. The Zerath will search the cliffs first. We need to move." "Where?" someone asked. "There is nowhere safe." Daniel pointed toward the distant mountains where jagged peaks tore the horizon. "The tunnels there. I worked on them before. They run deep, abandoned after the first mines collapsed. If we can reach them, the Zareth won't follow easily." It was a hard journey, but they had no choice. With little food and only stolen water, they began the trek. Children stumbled, the old leaned on others, and yet no one gave up. Lyra walked among them, whispering encouragement, lifting the weak when they faltered. Daniel carried more than his share, his body aching but his resolve unbroken. Days passed. At night they lit no fires, fearing patrols. At dawn they climbed higher, following Daniel's memory of the land. The mountains loomed closer, their stone faces silent witnesses to the struggle of the small band below. The Zerath Council, meanwhile, seethed with anger. Reports of the mass escape spread across the colony. The overseers demanded swift punishment. Soldiers were dispatched, hunters unleashed. "They will learn fear again," one counselor hissed. But another warned, "This is different. It is not just one slave now, it is many. If they succeed, others will rise." Still, arrogance clouded their judgment. They believed their power absolute. They did not see the storm building beyond their walls. At last, the fugitives reached the tunnels. Dark mouths opened in the stone, leading into shadow. The air was damp, the ground uneven, but it was shelter. Daniel led them inside, guiding them through twisting paths until they found wide chambers once used for storage. Here at least they could rest. For a time, safety seemed possible. They built small fires deep enough that no smoke would betray them. They shared stories of lost homes, stolen families, and forgotten dreams. And always they listened to Lyra. One evening she stood before them all. "The Zerath want us to believe we are nothing. But look around. We are many. We are strong. If we can free ourselves, others will believe they can too. This is no longer escape. This is a beginning." Her words lit sparks in tired hearts. Even Daniel, who had long buried hope, felt something awaken inside. He saw not just survivors, but a people ready to rise. But hope alone would not keep them safe. Supplies ran low. The group needed food, tools, and medicine. Without them, sickness and hunger would weaken them before the Zerath even arrived. Daniel decided to act. "I'll go back," he said one night, his voice steady. "I know the storage depots. I can steal what we need." Lyra's eyes widened. "It's too dangerous. If they catch you," and he touched her hand gently. "If I don't go, all of this ends. We didn't come this far to starve in caves." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Then you won't go alone." "I will go with you." He shook his head. "No, they'll recognize you. You're the one they fear most." But Lyra's voice was firm. "Then let them fear me." The two slipped back toward the colony under cover of night. The journey was tense, every shadow hiding possible patrols. When they reached the outer edges, Daniel used his knowledge of maintenance routes to slip inside. The depot loomed before them, guarded but not heavily. Daniel worked the locks with quick fingers, disabling alarms while Lyra kept watch. Together they filled packs with food and tools, but just as they prepared to leave, shouts rang out. A patrol had spotted them. Run! Daniel hissed. They dashed through the alleys, guards chasing close behind. Energy shots lit the night, striking walls and kicking up sparks. Daniel pulled Lyra into a hidden passage he remembered from his workdays. The tunnel led them beneath the outer fences, spitting them back into the wild. Breathless, hearts pounding, they collapsed against the rocks. Lyra looked at him and laughed softly despite the danger. You are reckless, Daniel smiled faintly. So are you. In that moment, as the stars spread above them, they realized something had shifted. Their bond was no longer forced by chains or survival. It was chosen. It was theirs. Back in the tunnels, the supplies were greeted with joy. The people ate, drank, and felt strength return. For the first time, they dared to plan, not just hiding, but fighting back. We can't run forever, Daniel told them. The Zirath will hunt us down eventually. But if we strike first, if we show others it's possible, then we can start something larger. Lyra agreed. We do not fight for revenge. We fight for freedom, for a future where no one is bought or chained. The group prepared quietly. They sharpened stolen tools into weapons, mapped routes to weak points in the colony, and taught one another how to move as one. Daniel trained them in engineering tricks, how to cut power, how to jam systems. Lyra trained them in courage, how to believe in themselves even when fear pressed close. The night of their return came at last. Under the cover of darkness, the freed slaves moved down from the mountains. They struck at the colony with speed and precision. Fences fell as power grids failed. Storage depots were raided, freeing more supplies and more captives. The Zirath guards, unused to fighting rebels, faltered. They had never faced an enemy fueled not by orders but by hope. For the first time, the slaves fought back and won. When dawn rose, smoke drifted over the colony. Parts of it still stood, but the symbol of Zirath control was cracked. Hundreds more had escaped, fleeing to the mountains to join the growing rebellion. The council raged, but fear spread among them. The humans and aliens they once controlled were no longer silent. In the tunnels, the rebels celebrated quietly, knowing the war was only beginning. But for now, they had won a piece of freedom. Daniel stood beside Lyra, watching the people laugh and cry together. She turned to him, her eyes softer than he had ever seen. They forced us together, she said. They thought it would break us, but it made us strong. Daniel nodded. They thought love was weakness. They were wrong. He took her hand and she did not pull away. Around them, voices rose in hope, not chains. And in that dark mountain refuge, far from the towers of their oppressors, love had truly changed everything.